The 20-Minute Call is brought to you by SSK Industries, home of Cyprus, USA. Welcome to the 20-Minute Call, the podcast about the dreamers, boundary pushers, rebels, and champions of the skydiving industry. Each episode is a narrative journey highlighted by the highs, lows, and luck that the skydiving industry delivers, as told by the most influential people within the sport. If you've ever dreamed of becoming a skydiver, perhaps opening a drop zone, or becoming the next world champion, you'll enjoy the 20-Minute Call, hosted by me, James LeBarry. My guest today is someone I consider to be skydiving royalty, for she is a trailblazer in an era where women were a much greater minority than they are today in our sport. Jackie Smith is the first woman to wear the Red Beret of the British Army's Red Devils, one of the most respected parachute teams in the world. The fact Jackie earned her way onto the team would be enough, but she was a brilliant jumper, beating many of the boys. Jackie is a multi-time British national champion in both style and accuracy and 8-way formation skydiving, and most notably won gold in women's accuracy at the 1978 World Championships in Yugoslavia by being the first person to ever score 10 consecutive dead centers in competition. Though she won gold in the women's category, she beat every competitor there in both the men's and women's divisions under the same conditions and aircraft. Other notable feats include base jumping from El Capitan in 1980 and jumping into the opening ceremonies of the 1986 Commonwealth Games, which was watched by 102 million people. By the end of her jumping career, Jackie had amassed roughly 6,000 jumps, of which 925 were under round parachutes. She was part of 459 display jumps, and she has jumped from 58 different types of jump aircraft. Some of her accolades include becoming an honorary U.S. Army Parachute Team Golden Knight, recipient of the Royal Aero Club Golden Medal, and she was inducted into the International Skydiving Hall of Fame in 2013. She is also a recipient of the prestigious Jim Crocker Trophy. It is truly my honor to welcome the amazing Jackie Smith to the 20-Minute Call podcast. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, James. What an introduction. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's quite a life you've lived.
I also did four-way as well. I was a cameraman for Symbiosis when they won silver medal. I was the team alternate for the four-way as well as the 8-way as well. So
Yes, and Symbiosis. When I think of that team, I think of Tony Uragallo. Were you on that team with him at that time?
yeah, Symbiosis was William Grutt and Rob Kulpus, Tony, Jeff Sanders on the four-way team, and yeah, I mean, a few other people have joined the team after I left, so I think it expands to about another 12 people, and yeah, we were prominent in the 70s. I think we won the British Nationals the first year in 1976 in 8-way, and in 1977 we won the British Nationals in 8-way and 4-way, but the BPA, British Parachute Association, didn't want the same 4-way team to come out of the 8-way team to compete at the World Championships. So the 4-way team had to forfeit that World Championship so that the 8-way could go ahead and compete at the World Championships in Gatton in Australia. We came fourth in Australia behind tough competition. It was mirror image from USA, and the Germans were right up there competing as well. And then after that, Symbiosis did 4-way and 8-way for the next 15, 20 years, dominant in UK.
It sounds like skydiving has definitely taken you all over the world and have certainly met so many people from so many different countries. But Jackie, I'd like to figuratively parachute into the past, specifically to 1969. You were, I believe, 17 years old at that time when you decided you would join the British Army. I just can't imagine how many people at age 17 know that they want to do this. And certainly during that era, it wasn't a thing that maybe many women thought of. So what was your motivation to want to join the Army at such a young age?
I was sports mad. I was sports crazy at school. I took part in swimming. I was on the school swimming team. We used to swim in inter-county competitions, and I also used to dive as well. I think I was the first person in my school to dive off the top board, high dive. It wasn't anything fancy like gymnastic type diving, but yeah, diving, swimming, and we play rounders over here. It's a bit like girls' baseball, if you like, and netball. I was into everything, every sport, and then I did the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which is a premier youth activity where you can get a bronze, silver, or a gold, and you can start it at 14 years old and finish at 24. I obviously didn't, because I joined the army when I was at 17. I got my bronze and silver and started my gold, but you have to do a pursuit, and you develop confidence, and you volunteer and you take up a skill. My skill was my physical activity was trampolining, so I did my trampolining for Duke of Edinburgh's Award. And then the volunteering, it was like helping the aged, or volunteering at like a supermarket. You know, it was like group organisation, and we also had to go on expeditions as well, which were organised as well. But you know, at 14 years old, going out on an expedition and living without your parents for the first time, it's quite daunting, but you build confidence. And then when I was about 15, a recruiting sergeant came into the school, and she played a film. And in the film, it showed army life, marching and saluting and everything. But the sport, it really attracted me, and I thought, wow. And then I looked into the types of jobs that you can go into in the army, and the one I elected to go into was a physical training instructor. I wanted to be a physical training instructor. So from the age of 14 up until I was 17, I was going through the examination. You know, you have to have a medical and a physical examination and a mental examination, and yeah, I came through, and my joining date was the 3rd of April, which was like 4 days after my 17th birthday. So I joined the army on the 4th of April and left home and waved goodbye to my parents and my family, and what an amazing life I've had because of it.
What did your parents think about you joining the Army?
My dad cried. I still have visions of him sitting on the stairs crying his eyes out. He didn't want to lose me. I'm one of 5 children. I'm the 4th child. So my older sister and older 2 brothers had left home, and they were working, but yeah, he didn't want me to go. He fought in the war, my dad, World War II. So the army I was joining was a different army to the army that he had to join, because it was conscription then during the war. But yeah, it was heart-wrenching watching him cry. But yeah, they became very proud of me, terrified that I took up the sport of parachuting. I'm not sure that they wanted me to continue when I first started doing it. But when I joined the team, and we did local shows, demonstrations and parachute displays up north where I'm from, my mum and dad came to the showground to watch. And if we were there for 2 days, my dad got to sit in the right-hand seat of the aircraft and watch me jump out while my mum was in the arena watching me. And then on the second day, they swapped around so that my mum was in the aircraft watching me fly, take off and fly and jump out and everything. And my dad was on the ground, so watched me pack my parachutes on the side of the arena. They were so proud, so proud.
Jackie, you've been quoted to say that you come from humble beginnings.
Oh, yeah.
So I imagine that your family must have been so proud coming from, as you say, humble beginnings.
Yeah, I was born in the northeast. It was streets, hobbled backyards, no front garden, no back garden, outside toilet, tin bath in front of the fire. And in the house I was born into, I was the fourth child. My youngest sister was born in a different house. But so that was my mum and dad and 4 children in my grandparents' house. And it was just a very tiny 2 up, 2 down. Everything happened in front of the coal fire because they didn't have carpets or we didn't have central heating. We used to have Jack Frost on the inside of the windows. And when we went to bed, we were all in the same bed. Mum and Dad used to put coats and stack blankets on top of us to keep us warm. And there was so many blankets on top of us, you couldn't roll over. You were like pinned in the bed. You just couldn't move.
Jackie, forgive me for saying this, but what you just described makes me think of the early opening scenes of Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory when, in the original movie, where they're all the whole family's, in a bed together and, it's cold and...
Yeah, and in the northeast where I'm from, it's particularly cold. You get the cold winds off the North Sea, from Norway and Denmark, and it was very, very cold. Water bottles. We used to have water bottles to take to bed. It was very basic. We didn't have television. I don't think. When I was 3, I think I was 3. We were given my family another council house away from my grandparents, and that was huge compared to my grandparents' house. And we had a front garden and a back garden, and then at the bottom of the garden we had a beck, a stream. Beck is a Norwegian. All the Vikings landed where I'm from in the northeast. So a lot of the
where in the northeast are you from?
Well, it's a little town that's not there anymore. It's called South Bank, and it's near Middlesbrough. And it was all docks and steelworks and ICI, gasworks. The pollution, around the area was terrible. But the town I grew up in, it was. I'm in a group now on Facebook, and it's all the people that grew up there, and we have fond memories of everybody knowing everybody else, and everybody knowing like the dog's name, even in the surrounding streets. And you felt safe. I had such a unrestricted childhood. I used to leave home, and my mum never knew where I was, who I was with. We had to be home when the lights went on the street lights, and I just used to go out. I used to walk all the way up Eston Hills and walk over to Saltburn, which is the beach, and then all the way back. It was like 10 miles, and I must have only been 8, 9, 10 years old. Much safer environment than children have got, today. But I was totally free.
This episode is brought to you by SSK Industries, home of Cypress, USA. Since its release in 1991, the Cybernetic Parachute Release System, or Cypress, has been on more than 192 million skydives and has never failed to activate when called upon in the most critical moments. Engineered and built with German precision, the device has saved over 5,400 lives. Why choose anything else? when your life might just depend on it. Cyprus. I'm going to reference back to, your parents seeing you as a Red Devil, which is essentially the British equivalent of the U.S. Army Golden Knights, a prestigious team that's viewed with great respect. And I want to fast forward because we have so much to talk about that I'd love my audience to hear. You joined the Army in 1969, and by 1972, after having proven yourself in some civilian skydiving, invited you to become the first female on the Red Devils. Such a prestigious thing to receive the Red Beret.
When I joined the Army and I wanted to be a physical training instructor, they don't like you to go straight to the PT corps, the physical training corps straight away, because you get rank. You get sergeant sort of pretty fast after you've passed out. And if I didn't have the experience in the military to hold that rank, you could take it the wrong way. So they like you to go into another trade, for a year before you go to the physical training school to become a physical training instructor. So I went into Royal Signals, and it was all telecommunications, military communications. And because I wasn't old enough to be posted abroad, you had to be 17 and 10 months to be posted abroad. I was posted to Aldershot. All of my colleagues in training, there was lots of sunshine postings, as they were called, like Cyprus and Singapore, Hong Kong, Germany, Malaya. There's some amazing postings, and when they were calling out the names in alphabetical order, I was Smith 161. That was my last three numbers in my army number, and they got to Smith 161, Aldershot. No. I'd been to Aldershot when I was in basic training at Guildford, and they'd warned us not to go there because all the paras were there. They were, and it was quite daunting to go to Aldershot when we were in training, because you've got all of the junior parachute regiment lads trying to prove themselves. It was a very male town, soldier town. Well, everywhere was then. There wasn't any females in the parachute regiment. Yeah, you'd get all of these young paratroopers fighting, in the pubs and stuff like that. And we escaped. We went back to our camp at Guildford and thought, Aldershot's a terrible place. And then I got posted there. I wanted to leave the army that day that I was posted to Aldershot. Anyway, as it went on, Aldershot was a great place. The physical training school was just down the road from my barracks. There was a military swimming pool right next to where I worked. The depot, the parachute regiment, was right across the road from where I worked in the signals unit in HQ Southeast District. Apart from all of the other sports that I was doing, running, trampolining, swimming in my spare time, I took up badminton at Depot, the Parachute Regiment barracks, Browning Barracks, and that was just literally about 500 yards run across a field from where my accommodation was. So every night I was playing badminton with the officers and the sergeants and everybody in the parachute regiment that worked at the Depot Para. One day I came out of work and I saw the barrage balloon next to the parachute regiment depot barracks, and I saw four parachutes, one by one. A parachute would just appear and then it would land, and so straight after work I made my way over to watch the parachuting, and the barrage balloon was on a winch. So it was 800 feet up and four men up, and they take four men up at a time. And I just laid next to the vehicle that the winch was on my back on the ground, watching their boots appear, and then I could watch the thickness of the tread of their boots appearing to get thicker and thicker as they got lower and lower, and then the parachute would just whoosh open, breathe, and then they would land sort of in my vicinity. Oh, and I thought, I've got to have some of that. It was just fantastic. So I put my name down for a parachuting course, thinking, I went up to the Women's Royal Army admin office to put my name down for a parachuting course. And they told me that the women didn't do parachuting. Well, they were ill-advised. They didn't know that the females could do parachuting, and they didn't know that there was sport parachuting. And I didn't know that there was sport parachuting at that time either. I thought that what I was volunteering to put my name down on a parachuting course was to do what I'd just witnessed the men doing, jumping out of the barrage balloon. But they declined. They said that females couldn't do it. And then I told a chap that I was playing badminton with that I wanted to do a parachuting course. His name was Derek Thorne. He was a staff sergeant instructor in the physical training corps that worked at the depot of the parachute regiment. He just happened to be my doubles partner at badminton. And he said that he was running a basic static line course. That was all there was then. There wasn't any other AFF or anything like that. And he was doing it for the junior parachute regiment. Would I like the information? So he gave me all of the paperwork, and I took it up to my company office, my Women's Royal Army Corps company office, and told them that I was allowed to go on a static line course, and he was running the courses. And then they accepted. They said that I could go on the course, and they accepted. There was 4 females on the course, 3 other friends, and we ended up doing all of our ground training at the depot of the parachute regiment, Browning Barracks gymnasium, all our PLFs. We did like 2 weeks of PLFs and harness training and packing parachutes. We were trying to close those B4 backpacks on a slippy gymnasium, highly polished floor, and when we were trying to close these B4 backpacks that were really, really difficult because the canopies were so bulky, and everybody was just slipping and sliding around the shiny floor in the gymnasium. It was so frustrating. But so we did all our ground training, and then we ended up, after the 2 weeks, it was 2 weeks in the evening, still had to do my job during the day. But then we went to Netheravon, and we all travelled down in the back of military 3-ton open canvas type vehicles, and it took us about an hour and a half to get to Netheravon in Wiltshire. It's where I live now. And when we got to Netheravon, we saw the airfield for the first time, and the old Rapide aircraft. A Rapide aircraft, de Havilland Rapide aircraft, is a big biplane that would take 7 students and an instructor. And it was just amazing just to see this big, wide, vast open drop zone that we were going to jump out of. And I think the psychology of the sport then was he put me first. He wrote out the manifests, and Derek Thorne put my name first so that I would exit first. And we got into the aeroplane, we did all our aircraft safety, how to approach the aeroplane from the rear, propellers, be wary of the propellers and everything. And we took off, hooked us up on our static lines, and we took off, and that was my first ride in an aeroplane. I'd never even been close to an aeroplane. I'd never flown before, and so we took off, and I was the first one out. And I suppose his logic was that I couldn't refuse because there was 6 blokes behind me. I had to put a brave front on for the female species. And I climbed out, and I did my 5 second, it was 3 seconds. It was 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 check canopy. And static line, and I watched the airplane fly away, and he was like hanging out, holding onto the strut, because the strut is on the outside of the wing. You can step out onto the wing, and he was like hanging out. He had a foot out on the wing, holding onto the strut. giving me the thumbs up, and it was just amazing. I couldn't breathe. I think my lung capacity would only let me breathe to like 2 inches, and it was like I'd robbed a bank. I was so, oh, that was just fantastic. But then it was over too fast. I landed before I sort of really had time to appreciate it, and I was hooked, absolutely hooked.
Jackie, I feel as you recall that, it sounds as if, I can't see your face right now, but I imagine you're smiling. It sounds like you've just transported yourself back to that moment.
Oh, yeah. It was just amazing. Just amazing.
The 20-Minute Call is proud to partner with Freefall Films, the #1 AI video editing solution for the skydiving industry, and the company I most recommend to my DZ clients. I endorse this software not because they're paying for this ad, but because I wholeheartedly believe Freefall Films is the best editing software in our industry. The software is backed by unparalleled customer service and genuinely makes drop zones more money. Get a free demo and mention the 20-Minute Call to receive a credit of $200. Freefall Films. Simpler, more powerful, more profitable. Tell me, Jackie, during this period of time, you are almost like the scarlet letter. That you are the female. This seems to be a running theme throughout your career because you are not even a minority, you're essentially one of one. So when you eventually became onto the Red Devils, how were you received by your teammates? I mean, were they all thinking, who's this, woman on our team?
Who's this female? Yeah, well, after my basic course, I entered the Army Championships at Netheravon, and that was, I started jumping in the March, and in the May, I entered the Army Championships as a novice in accuracy, and I was jumping a C9LL and, the big B4 backpack and the front mount reserve. I think I had 1.5 shots on and really uncomfortable gear. And anyway, I won the novices event, and at that championships, competing with the Red Devils in the senior event. And at the prize giving, the team commander, who was Major Peter Schofield, he came up to me and patted me on the back because I'd won the novices event. I had to go up and be presented to General Sir Mog, who presented me with this big trophy. And Major Peter Schofield, patted me on the back and he said, "Keep it up, girl." He says, "You've got talent. You could be world champion." And I was gobsmacked that he even spoke to me, let alone told me I was good. I was floored because I somebody of such a high profile, the Red Devils team commander, telling me I'm good. And anyway, I kept on jumping. I used to travel down to Netheravon on weekends and just spend all weekends, hanging about to jump. Over that next few months, I was invited by another military team to do some parachute displays with them. 9 Squadron, they were the Airborne Royal Engineers. And my first 2 parachute displays were with 9 Squadron into donkey derbies and Royal Engineers passing off parades. And my first 2 demos was on my 32nd and 33rd jump, jumping from a helicopter with smoke. I'd never jumped a helicopter before, had I? Or popped smoke. And he was very active, trying to get me active with his team. And then one day he told me that he didn't want to take me away from what he knew that Peter Schofield had in mind for me. He wouldn't tell me what it was. But behind the scenes, Major Peter Schofield, was writing to my Queen Bee in the Women's Royal Army Corps to ask permission, could I join the team part-time in 1971. This is when I first started jumping. and she obviously sat around with all of the women's Royal Army hierarchy, and they decided that I couldn't join the Red Devils. I couldn't join a parachute team because they were worried that when I flew overhead the crowds, that the crowds would be able to see up my skirt because they didn't realise that you don't wear skirts when you go parachuting. They were ill advised, but then nobody knew very much about parachuting in them days, so they obviously didn't know that I'd be wearing a jumpsuit. But after headquarters at Depot, the parachute regiment started writing letters to support Major Peter Schofield. My Queen Bee allowed me to join the Red Devils. But it was under Major Peter Schofield assured her that I'd be looked after. I was joining a team of 30 men, 29 men and me, and he would look after me. I was going to be exposed to so much. I was exposed to the whole male environment, nakedness, shaving, swearing, everything. And I totally accepted it. I was joining the team. They weren't joining me. And no, the lads on the team were very polite and looked after me. I was like their sister. And when I joined the team officially full-time in February 1972, I'd already spent about the last 6 months of 1971 part-time with them. I used to go away with them on a weekend to do ground party. I learned how to do ground party, put the cross out in the arena, and pop the smoke and watch the routine that they did. And then I joined the team full time, and it was just massive. It was big press, TV. It's just worldwide. It was, the first female on a full time military team in the world, and the exposure that it gave to the Women's Royal Army Corps, the Army in general, and the Parachute Regiment. Was just it was just amazing, and that was why we were there, the Red Devils. We were there for recruiting purposes, keep the army in the public eye. And so everything that happened that big press day, that in February 1972, it just put the British Army, the Women's Royal Army Corps, the Parachute Regiment, it was just in the press and TV, radio. It was just amazing.
Jackie, in preparation for our interview, I saw a video that was put out by the BBC in 1972 after you were a member of the Red Devils. And the reporter is speaking to you via radio, and you are under your parachute at about 2,000 feet, and it looks windy, and you're working very hard, and you land, and of course, the parachute.
I didn't land. I arrived,
and you're getting dragged back a bit, and then you're put on camera after all that, and you're very calm to say it was a bit of a rough landing, and it was a very involved jump being in those winds, but you look so earnest and innocent, and not seeming to be feeling the pressure of having the great BBC there speaking to you after a pretty stressful looking jump.
Yeah, I remember that day. We, it's typical, isn't it, when the press come down to do a TV recording, it's typical that the weather turns adverse to whatever sport you're doing. And it was blowing a hoolie, and we had to jump. We were told we had to jump. We weren't ordered to jump, but we had to do it for the any publicity was good. And we jumped, and we got out of the helicopter. short. I didn't spot it. It was my team sergeant major that spotted it short, and it was really, really windy, and I was holding into wind on my Papillon round parachute, which was classed as high performance then, and I held it into wind the whole time, and he was asking me to do some manoeuvres. And I think I was saying, well, if I pull down on my left toggle, I can do a turn, but I could only do a slight tug on my left toggle to sort of tilt my direction like 10 degrees to the left, just to show him that I could steer it a little bit further away. And then I came into land. I was going backwards when I landed, and fortunately Sutty Standrin, one of my team colleagues, he'd landed before me, so he knew it was really windy. He'd taken his gear off, and he stood so that he could catch my canopy, because I was getting dragged, and he ran my canopy around the other side, and I did get dragged. That was quite a hard landing. I stoofed in like a sack of potatoes.
But Jackie, the point I want to make there is you just seem so in earnest, and you seem so young and innocent among, in this parachute regiment, with the external or the exterior that we saw of you in that interview. And I invite those listening that the link to that video is in the show notes below. But was that actually how you felt internally? Because you were a bit of a media sensation. I mean, the media was so interested in you and as a result, the team, because you were a woman. But how were you able to process all of that?
I don't know, really. I just took everything in my stride. I've never been a flapper, somebody to panic or anything like that. And when it was just the BBC, we had sat down prior to the jump, and we got to know each other over a cup of tea. No, I was as relaxed with them as I am with you now. I never found any of the press daunting, or I never felt out of my depths. I knew my subject, I knew what I was talking about, and I felt confident to put myself forward and deliver whatever they wanted to talk about, parachuting wise.
Jackie, early in your career, I want to say it might have been maybe your first, you'll have to correct me, display jump. And for our American listeners, display jump is a demo jump.
Yeah.
But you made a demo jump to Swansea.
Swansea.
And was very nearly killed. Will you tell us that story?
When I joined the team in the February 1972 for team training, we went to Germany to the Rhine Army Parachute Centre near Bad Lippspringe, and we did a month's training prior to our forthcoming season. When we were bombarded with parachute displays, and when we got back from Germany, we did one official practice demonstration for me and a couple of other lads on the team that had joined at the same time, Steve Slater and Scotty Milne, Curly Davis. And so we did a parachute display at the end of our training in Germany onto a parade square into the barracks in Senelager. And it was quite tight on a round parachute. There was lots of anti-parachutist fences and spikes and, flags and buildings and everything. And we all landed on the parade square. There was a cross on the parade square, and that was really nerve-wracking. I felt really nervous doing that because I didn't want to let the team down. I thought I was more nervous on that jump than on my first jump, because I had this pressure of everybody watching me, and I didn't want to let the team down. But when we came back from Germany, my first parachute display was into Swansea, into Mumbles. It was like a field right on the edge of the harbour, And we were supposed to jump 2 jumps a day. I think the first one was 11 o'clock, and then we would pack our parachutes and we'd drive back to the airport and then wait around for an hour or two and then jump later in the afternoon. Because the show organisers used to get the parachutists to jump in early to get the crowds in, and then we'd jump into the showground late, and it kept all of the public in the showground. You know, it's they make more money, don't they, keeping everybody into the showgrounds. Anyway, we took off on the first show on the Saturday, and we were doing 2 jumps a day, Saturday and Sunday. And on the first jump, we threw the wind drift indicator, and it went for miles and miles, and it went from the sea to inland. You know, so the winds were coming off the sea. So we cancelled, and it was really, really windy. So we flew back to the airport and we landed, and we just swung our legs, as we call it in the British Army. You swing your legs when you've got nothing to do. Had cups of tea out of the vending machine and just waited around. And then we took off for the second display of the day. I think it was about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And we went up and threw the wind drift indicator, and the winds had done a 180, and the winds were blowing out to sea from the land this time. And we climbed, and it was still windy, but we decided we were going to go. It was always a vote in the aircraft, you know, we're going to go. We climbed to altitude, and on the first pass was me and Steve Slater, and we dived out the door. And as I dived out the door, I caught the top of my B4 backpack. I didn't think anything of it at the time. And, you know, we got together, did a 2-way, had smoke on our feet. So we did a candy pull when you sort of spiral. So it makes a candy pull for the spectators in the arena to pick us up. And we broke off. And then when it came for me to pull, I had a inbound left-handed pull, and I took the handle out and pulled, but I couldn't pull it. It couldn't pull the ripcord out, and so I used my right hand to push down on my left hand to push it down, and couldn't do it. I had to deploy my front mount reserve, and the reserve went up, but because my smoke on my foot was still billowing, this big orange flumy, you know, it was just coming straight up at me because I was in a standing up position, but my parachute had half opened, but the smoke was coming up my body and over my face, up my nose and over my face. So I couldn't really see very well. But when the smoke went, I could see that my reserve parachute, it was a 22-foot Defender round canopy, but my reserve had inverted, and it had blown 13 panels from apex to periphery. So there wasn't very much above me, and I was coming down quite fast. I knew I was coming down fast because the smoke on my foot was still coming straight up my body, you know, instead of trailing out behind me. Before we do parachute displays, we do recce's to the showground to make sure that there's no, you know, high tension cable wires and it's not near a busy road or anything. But because we were near the sea on this occasion, we were wearing life jackets, and we'd also arranged lifeboats just in case any of us landed in the water. And lo and behold, there I was going down quite fast, and I was going out to land in the sea. So as I approached the water, I popped it's like a little pull cord on the life jacket, like you get on aircraft. Popped that just as I was about to put my feet in the water. You know, it was my ground training, because we'd done all of this in ground training. What happens if you do a water jump? And I went into the water quite hard, and my life jacket inflated, you know, just before I hit the water. But my life jacket, because it was restricted in inflating fully, because my harness was still intact. I had the snap ejector on my chest strap, and my harness stopped it from inflating all the way out. So what it did was it actually inflated it blew my chest. It sort of pressed against my breath. I can feel it now. I pressed against my lungs, and so I could only breathe like an inch into my lungs because the life jacket was stopping me from breathing properly. And then my reserve parachute was like inflated under the water, with the drag of the currents under the water, and still with the main parachute still in my container, which was weighing me down. And I was bobbing about for a while, and one of the chaps that used to be on the Red Devils, called Shirley Vatnsdal, he was a Canadian guy that was on the original team. He was one of the original team members. He'd left the team and he was in the helicopter display team. It was the Blue Angels, they were called. And they were supposed to do their helicopter display after we'd landed in the arena. As parachutists had landed in the arena. And he left he left his helicopter display to come out to where I was bobbing about in the sea. And he hovered above me to make sure I was okay. And he was flying a Sioux helicopter. It was like a big bubble on the front of it. And I had to give him the thumbs up, but I had to make arms pushing him away because the downdraft from his blades, when he was hovering near me, was causing so much splash. It was nearly pushing me under. So he went, but then meanwhile, Steve Slater, who I'd jumped with, we did this candy pull because we were out on the first path. He'd landed on the beach and he stripped off on the beach, took all his gear off, stripped down to his T-shirt and his underpants, and swam out to me. And I must have been 400 yards out to sea. And by the time Steve got to me, he was exhausted. It was freezing cold, bitterly cold, and when he got to me, he had to hold on to my life jacket and so my life jacket saved the pair of us because we were just bobbing about in the sea. But the fact that he swam out to try and save me, I'm totally indebted to him for the rest of my life, and he's my best friend still to this day. And then we sat bobbing about for ages, and none of the lifeboats that we'd organised turned up. Eventually, a lady turned up in this little boat, and as she was approaching, she said in this really posh English voice, "Hello, my dears. Would you like a lift?" Well, me and Steve looked at each other. And we just burst out laughing because we were freezing cold, bobbing about in the water. We were blue. My lips were purple. Couldn't feel my fingers. And it was like we were standing at a bus stop waiting for a bus to come along, So anyway, Steve could climb on board a boat because he just had his T-shirt and underpants on. But I couldn't get on board because I had all this gear that was weighed down with water. It was saturated main canopy, which was still in a container on the back. I couldn't undo my chest strap. It had sort of welded itself together. It was a alligator clip. No, it wasn't alligator. It was a snap ejector. So it sort of welded itself together with the force from the life jacket. And anyway, I had to bob around for quite a few more minutes, and then another boat turned up with some big, strong men on it, and then they could haul me back on board. It took such an effort to get me on board with all that equipment on me. And then once I was on board, we were chug back to the harbour, and the lady reached into her handbag and she said to me she said, "My dear, you look terrible. Put some lipstick on." So me and Steve, we just couldn't believe it. This woman was totally on another planet. There we were, sort of bobbing about in the sea, asking us, "Oh, would you like a lift?" And then she offered me lipstick. But then we got off at the harbour, and my team sergeant major and everybody had landed in the arena, and they went back to the harbour and they welcomed me and Steve back onto dry land. We went to the fire station and took my parachutes, and we hung them up and soaked them down, hosed them down to get rid of all the salt off the equipment and everything. Went back to the bed and breakfast hotel and hung my parachute out the window. And we had a spare front mount reserve, so it was just my main parachute and container that we had to sort out. And then the next morning, I put it all together again, assembled it all together again in the breakfast hall. There was all these guests in this hotel, and I was sort of laid my parachute down in amongst the tables and packed my parachute, closed the parachute. They thought it was amazing to have a red devil there, the red devil girl there, and packing a parachute in front of them while they were eating breakfast. And then we went out and we emplaned again and went to jump into the arena again. But on the Saturday when we were supposed to jump, when we did jump, there must have been about, I'd say, 500 people around the arena. But on the Sunday morning, it had hit all the newspapers, and I was on the front page of all of the national newspapers, on the television. It was worldwide. A paragirl hurtles into the sea. And when we jumped in on the 11 o'clock jump on the Sunday, there must have been, I'm not exaggerating, there must have been 20,000 people there, compared to the 500 that was there the day before. So the word had got out that the Red Devils were jumping again. And we laughed, because we just laughed and thought that all those people that had turned up on the Sunday had turned up to watch me go back into the sea again. But I didn't. I landed on the cross. It was a successful skydive, and I landed on the cross. Yeah. And I waved I put my arms up in the air, and it was like, woo!
Unbelievable story. And there's a few things that strike me about it. It was essentially your first demo. And what I'm hearing you tell the story with great animation, but I'm not hearing you say that you were angry, because where were the rescue boats that you'd organized? I would have felt a bit upset. Were you not a bit traumatized, being that you nearly died? And did you not ever question if this is for you? Because the very start of your display career ends up in nearly you being killed.
Yeah, I know. No, I wasn't phased at all. I was hoping. I think I deployed my main parachute higher than I would normally have deployed it back then, because, I just had this malfunction, and I just wanted to have a little bit more altitude just in case. But no, I wasn't. We weren't. I think the authorities that had supposed to have been organising the lifeboats were sort of reprimanded. It would have been terrible had I died, wouldn't it? They'd have had that to rest with them for the rest of their lives.
I can imagine that had the female Red Devil died on her first display jump, how that narrative would have played that even further in the belief that women shouldn't be on the team. And
Yeah,
really nobody
that would
should
have
have
been
been
the end.
jumping in those winds as it was. So
Yeah. Whose idea was it to have a female on the Red Devils? Yeah, you've killed her. But it didn't kill me, and I'm still here. And no, it was just put it down to experience, really. It was. I had a few more malfunctions, but nothing quite as hairy as that. That was something out of the book, something out of the unusual, wasn't it?
This episode is sponsored by SSK Industries, home of Cyprus, USA. Since 1983, SSK has served the parachuting industry, and today they focus on Cyprus sales, service, and support in the United States. Learn more at sskinc.com. I'd like to fast forward now a few years to 1978, which is a year that may be most notable in your career because at the World Championships in then Yugoslavia, you were the first competitor in the history of the sport to get 10 dead centers in a row. And I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what you recall from that competition. Yeah, there's something that I'm hoping that you will mention in this story that was most notable to me. But will you pick up the story from arriving at the competition?
We got to Zagreb in Yugoslavia, and I think that was about my fourth or fifth British team. I'd done really well in 1976, but I messed up on one jump, and I knew that I could do it. I could do it. So we got to Zagreb, and the first day that we jumped, I got 5 dead centers. We were allowed to do one practice jump. Oh, and I have to tell you something then. I was jumping a Stratastar parachute with a slider on it, and I was jumping a SST Racer container, and there wasn't very many backpacks like that. Still, people were jumping backpacks and front mount reserves because most people did style, and they took their knees up against their reserve front mount. They used to anyway. But we did a practice jump, and then on the practice jump, everybody sort of gathers around the pit to watch the competition to see who was there. And on the practice jump, I came in and got a dead centre on my practice jump on the electronic pad. And a lot of people had progressed onto, strata clouds, not strata stars. And my canopy had like 1,000 jumps on it. I'd washed it in the washing machine because it was filthy. The night before I left Rayford to do my after my training there, a few of the lines snapped, and Mark Limond of the US team, he got everybody else went out for a meal and to celebrate the end of training, and me and Mark stayed on the drop zone. And Mark, that night, I'm forever thankful to him. He relined my canopy and tried to put the exact trim to give me the exact flight characteristics prior to the line snapping, and so that was my last jump. So my first jump in Zagreb was the practice jump, and that was my only practice jump on these new lines. And new lines then used to stretch, and so you'd be out of trim. But it was perfect, absolutely perfect. It flew exactly the same as it had all the way through my training. So yeah, Mark Limond, I have so much to thank for, and everybody was saying, "Oh, why don't you go onto a Stratacloud? You'd be better off on a Stratacloud." And but I knew my canopy inside out because I'd done so many jumps on it. And then on the first day, I got 5 back to back, 0.0, 0.0. And it was looking good. I never look at the scoreboard when in accuracy because I don't want to compete against the scoreboard. I just want to compete against me, my own ability. And I knew that if I was going to be world champion, I just had to dead centre the meet out. And then we did style for a couple of days, and and then the next day we did 2 jumps. I got 2 more dead centres. That was 7. And then a couple of days later, I got 2 more dead centres. And then after my 9th dead centre, everybody on the drop zone was coming up to me and patting me on the back, and I didn't need the pressure. They were saying, I hope you are the first person in the world to get 10 dead centres. And I just didn't need that pressure. I had to stay in my own mind, my own zone. And John Meacock was head of delegation. He could see that I didn't want these people. they're all friends and everything, and all their intentions are really good, but I just didn't need that pressure. So he sat me down behind the British team tent while we were all waiting. Normally I was playing hacky, or, I'd be walking around the drop zone chatting to people, but I didn't. I just had to be in my own zone. And he would just keep everybody away from me, and it was great. But then between the 9th jump and my 10th jump, we had 2.5 days bad weather. And during that 2.5 days, it was terrible. I've never felt pressure like it. It was overwhelming, the pressure. I couldn't sleep. I didn't want to eat. I remember laying in my bed at night time, for those 2 nights, tossing and turning. I felt like there was somebody there was a presence in my room. I felt like there was somebody in the room with me. I was that in the zone. I can't explain it, honestly. We went out to the drop zone on the 3rd day, and the winds were sort of high, and it was starting to get hot. It was getting around lunchtime, and as you know, weather is not constant, is it? The winds are strong. When it was hot, the thermals were making the windsock flick straight up into the sky, and then it would whiz round and it would do a 180. And it was thermals that was doing it, but the wind was sort of switching from this direction to this direction. Anyway, I watched the wind. They called for the accuracy, and that was me for my 10th round, and boarded the aircraft and climbed up, and all the way up in the aircraft. It was an Antonov aircraft with a big door, and you can look out the window and see. You could keep your eye on the windsock. And I think I was about number 5 or 6. I can't remember. And I watched the first girl go out. And when you're in competition, you watch their flight down to see where they're sort of setting up, and if they've landed in the middle of the pit, the middle of the target. And the first girl landed in the middle, and then the second girl did. But then the third girl that had got out, she landed on the edge of the pit. She landed outside the pit, on the grass outside the pit. So I'm thinking, and she was a really good jumper. I think she was East German. I thought, what's going on? Has the wind changed? Has she messed up, or has the wind changed? Is the thermal thrown her out there? And watched it. The next girl got out, and she landed outside the pit. And at that, the co-pilot came down into the aircraft. You can stand up in an Antonov aircraft. And he came down and he closed the door. It's like a big, proper sized door that we've got in the house. And he closed the door, and he made the signal, he's cutting across his neck, like we're going to hold. And he put his hand up 5, 10, 15 minutes that we were going to be held off. But he couldn't explain why we were going to be held off, because he couldn't speak English. But we all knew the hand signals. So we all sat down. Well, it was me next. I was the next one to be out, and I think there was 3 girls behind me. And so I just sat on the floor, and I loosened my leg straps and my helmet strap, my chest strap, and I just tried to. I put my head back and rested my head on my reserve pack on my container, and just tried to contain it, to contain my emotion and just think about all I had to do, And we flew around for, as it turned out, nearly 35 minutes, because whatever had happened on the ground, they couldn't relay up to us what had happened. And so the co-pilot came back down, and he opened the door, and he pointed to me, and he said, as if to say, "You're next." So I'd tightened up all my equipment and everything, and I was ready to go. We were on jump run, got out, and it was the only time my parachute snivelled. As I was watching the aircraft flying away, I could see my canopy I'd free packed my Stratostar. I'd rolled it in. Didn't use a bag. I just free packed it, and I could see it just snivelling and snivelling. And I said to it, "Just one more time, please. Just one more time. Open." And it just went pop. It really opened really hard, but it was a nice opening, nice and firm. Yeah, I just had to keep it all together. And when I didn't know what had happened with the girl, so I set up the girls that had missed the pit. So I set up really close to the pit, hot. We call it hot. Because altitude is security. You can always waste off altitude if you're too close. But if you set up too far away, you can never make up that distance to back to the target again. And I set up way too close to the target, and I had to go really deep down in brakes and sort of take it back, stall it a little bit, but control it when it came out of the stall so it didn't dive forward. You have to take it down and release the brakes a couple of inches and then take it straight back down to capture it so that the canopy goes back when you take the toggles down. But then when you let it go and take it back down, the canopy stops straight overhead again rather than diving forward. And then I set up, and I was still quite hot and deep in brakes, but then I could see there was like cameras right. They had like a little wedge cut into the side of the disc, if you like, and there was cameras there pointing straight up. I wasn't looking at them. I was concentrated on the disc, because once you set up, you're like on a wire going from where your setup point is all the way down to the target. But in my peripheral vision, I could just see that there was people there around the centre of the target. And as I was approaching, just like 10 feet off the ground, I could feel my right leg, my right ankle twitching, and my foot. I could feel my foot start to twitch. So I put my left foot out to strike the disc with my left heel. And my heel touched, and then my bottom, it's like a boom, boom. And I just sat there and closed my eyes, and it felt like 10 years, and it was only 2 seconds. And it came up on the electronic readout, 0.00. Oh, and I just leaned back into the pea gravel and just sighed. It wasn't a feeling of joy. It was a feeling of relief. It was extreme relief because the pressure had been that much. And then the next thing, all the rest of the lads on the team, the British team, they came in and picked me up and put me on their shoulders and took me out and put me down in front of the British team. And I couldn't take my gear off. My hands were trembling. I couldn't breathe. It was euphoric, like nothing else I'd ever felt before. And I wish I could have bottled that feeling and just shared it around, just so that everybody could feel that buzz. It was electric, just amazing. Just to say, the world champion after all of that training and the pressure, the release of pressure. Yeah, just great, just great. I loved it.
And Jackie, it should be noted that in all the stories that you've shared, you've been very calm and somewhat unemotional about all things, but this was that definitely got your emotions
Yeah,
high.
I cried.
Yeah,
I did
you
cry.
mentioned that in a different story I've read or heard, that you cried a lot during the national anthem.
Oh, God, yeah. Wow, that was amazing. After the competition had finished and they called for the prize giving, I had to have a shower because my hair was stuck to my head from my helmet. It was such a hot day. My hair had been, sweaty, and my hair had been stuck to the back of my neck, and I wanted to have a shower. And I went to the shower, and I cried in the shower. I remember I was crying in the shower. just relief. And they called us up for the prize giving, and I went up, and there was Cheryl. Cheryl came second. There was 2 centimetres between me and second place. Cheryl had got 2 centimetres on her first jump, but I didn't know that because I never looked at the scoreboard. And then there was a Russian girl. I think she got 3 centimetres on about her fifth jump. And they called us up and they said my name. Oh, no, we didn't have a Union Jack with us, the British flag. And we'd never won a medal before at a World Championships. And so in a last minute panic, the organisers had to hand paint a Union Jack on the piece of wood. And the paint was still wet. And when I was called up onto the podium, and they gave me I bent forward. They said my name, and I bent forward, put the gold medal round my neck, and handed me a bouquet of flowers. I turned right to look at the flags, of the winners on the flagpole. And I had the first 2 bars of the national anthem, "God Save the Queen," and I just lost it. I just cried and cried. And I didn't even know that they'd played the full national anthem, because all I heard was the first 2 bars. All I heard was dum 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 dum, and that was it. I was away crying. I just broke down. It was such an emotional relief. Yeah, just cried and cried. And when I see when I listen to the national anthem now, if I watch the Olympics or something like that, and I see them on the podium and they cry, and I think, yeah, I totally get why you're crying. It's like so emotional to be world champion for your nation and receive the gold medal. Yeah, I still, now when I hear the national anthem, it doesn't matter where I am, it still brings that emotion, and I can feel the back of my eyes filling up, and I do get a tear in my eye every time I hear the national anthem. And yeah, it was great. Loved it.
What a beautiful story.
And the reason I found out that the reason that the girls landed on the edge of the pit, there's rules in competition that you've got to be able to have seen the weather conditions, so many minutes prior to you jumping, and because I'd been flying around in the aircraft for nearly 35 minutes, head of delegation had written protests just in case I did mess up. But when I landed, John Meacock was head of delegation. I saw him tearing up this protest because we didn't need to protest because I'd got the 10th dead centre. Yeah.
Extraordinary. Tell me, Cheryl Stearns, who did come second in the competition separated by the 2 centimeters, did you all have a rivalry? I mean, she was essentially going through very similar things as being the first woman to be a member of the U.S. Army Golden Knights parachute team. Did you have a friendly rival? Because I know Cheryl's extremely competitive, and
I mean, I'd met, I used to go to Fort Bragg and train with the Golden Knights from like 1972 right through till, all the time I was on the team. We used to go over for winter training. Red Devils and Golden Knights used to train together. We used to go out to the military drop zones out there and jump all the military aircraft and everything. I met Cheryl in 1975, and she was flying there at Jean Paul Thacker's drop zone, and very new to the sport. I think I had 1,500 jumps by then, and I met her at the drop zone then. And then Cheryl joined the Golden Knights. No, we weren't. We were competitive, but not against each other. Before I'd gone to Zagreb, and every year prior to every style and accuracy world championships I've been to, I always used to train at Rayford in North Carolina. I used to pitch my tent in the trees, in the woods there, and there was Dan, the pilot, that used to have his caravan in the woods, and I used to go for a run every morning down the runway, and I used to train with mainly the national teams. All of the teams from around the world used to train at Rayford. The Canadians, the French, Germans, Dutch, the American team, as Team Rayford. Everybody used to train at Rayford, so that was the place to be. And like jumping there, every jump was like a jump at a World Championships. And at the end of every day, Jean-Paul Thacker used to hold a accuracy meet at the end of every day, if you like, and everybody on the drop zone, all of these national teams, and the American teams with the American team with the team to beat, Kathy Collingwood, Debbie Schmidt, and Cheryl, Linda Miller, and Jean-Paul Thacker used to put $5 wager on the competition, and whoever won got the $5. And he always used to have a case of beer for everybody as well. So during the training at Rayford, before any world meet, we'd all been competing against each other on every jump, on every training jump, really. Cheryl was just amazing accuracy jumper and amazing at style as well. So the Canadian girls were good, Kathy Cox, and I'm trying to think of some of the other nations. But yeah, Cheryl was right up there. She was the one to beat, really. I think she'd been world champion prior to me winning that accuracy competition. But no, there was no animosity. We got on with each other, and there was lots of banter on the drop zone. If you got 2 centimeters, everybody say, "Oh, that's a dirty dead center." Jean-Paul Thacker used to say, "Oh, that's a dirty dead center." That was 2 cents. So everybody went to the World Championships, and really it was anybody's. It's the best person on the day, really. We congratulated each other on the day, and she's a friend. She's a really good friend, and I've seen it quite a few times at other competitions that I've watched. Recently I watched her at the Lake Wales competition, and occasionally she'll get a bad jump and just walk away from it, because the next competition is always the next goal to try and win.
If you're a DZO or DZM listening to this podcast and you're not using Burble, I've got a question. Why not? If the reason is price, what's the cost of your time? Other booking and manifest softwares are a one-size-fits-all. Burble was built from the ground up by a DZO for DZOs to maximize efficiency. Now, isn't that nice? There's no software that compares. Choose Burble. My last question for you, Jackie, is have you ever thought about Major Schofield? Had he not opened the door for you? Clearly there was something about you that he saw. He saw the talent. He saw maybe the hunger. Clearly you were very talented. But he really stuck his neck out because, traditionalism is that the Red Devils are for men. And somehow he saw something in you. What do you think he saw in you for him to stick his neck out and give you a chance, which you then completely ran with?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what was going through his mind. But at the Army Championships where I first met him, I think he saw me on the drop zone, and I was one of the lads on the drop zone. I was always with the lads, because I was with everybody that was on my course was the junior para. The other 3 girls that I did the course with, they only did 1 jump. It was 2 of them are still local and my friends. Tina, she lives close to me. She lost her glasses doing a PLF off the table that we had to do on the ground training, and she just didn't like it at all, whereas I loved it. And so all the time that I was on the drop zone, and it was mainly, there was all men, even at the Army Championships. If you look at the names on the competitors list, I think there was only 2 females, but there must have been about 75 men. I was always doing stuff. We used to do gymnastics and handstands on the drop zone, and I mucked in with the lads. I don't think I came off as girly girl, asking for favours because I was too weak, or I just got stuck in and just did whatever they did. Yeah, maybe he saw that I had some talent. When I did the championships, I landed in the centre of the pit on all of my jumps on C9LL. And I beat a lot of people that were jumping para-commanders who were a lot more experienced than me. So I think I obviously had a good feel for the wind, the direction and how to control the parachute and everything. So he obviously saw that, but yeah, he did put his neck on the line for me to join the team, because the Red Devils is the parachute regiment freefall team, and the parachute regiment are the elite military regiment in the British military. So for them to maybe lose their image because a female had joined them could have sort of gone the wrong way, really, especially if I'd have not fitted in with the team or the regiment. Because, like when I joined the team, there was no, at the team room, I wasn't accommodated where they were. But when I was during my working day in the team room, there was no female toilets, there was no females anywhere, because there was no other females in the parachute regiment. There was no other females to sort of have a chat with. So all of the blokes were my friends, really. But I didn't feel it daunting, and I never felt intimidated or out of place. They made me feel welcome. And when I started competing and jumping and reaching the same level that they were at, which was high, the standard was high, I think I just gained respect, because I was doing exactly the same day-to-day things as they were doing. We'd go out for a run in the morning. I obviously wasn't as strong as them, but I had no problem packing as many parachutes, lifting my gear, long days on the road, driving to parachute displays and everything. And I never whinged. I never played the female victim. I just got on with it. I never felt I had to get on with it. I just did it.
I am happy to say that the insights that Major Schofield had in giving you the chance, and clearly he had to make sure that he gave the right person the chance, is the benefit of us all. You've been an amazing ambassador.
Oh, thank you.
for the sport globally, not just for Britain. A rightful place in the Hall of Fame, which, you are with Jean Paul Thacker and Tony Uragallo and Cheryl Stearns and many of your other friends. It's really an amazing career that you've had. You are so humble, and there's so many things that we didn't even get to with the adventures. But I am so grateful for your time and sharing your story. Just have great admiration for you.
No, it's very kind of you. Thank you very much. It's nice to have been able to recall some of the things that I've done, because as you get older, these things are in the far distance. And no, I appreciate you chatting to me today. It's been fantastic. Thank you.
Many thanks to our title sponsor, SSK Industries, home of Cyprus, USA, for supporting the 20-Minute Call. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And if you want to support the show further, support the companies that support this podcast. Until next time, blue skies.